Hello and welcome to FLAUNT, Create a Life You Love After Infidelity or Betrayal. I'm Lora Cheadle, and today's guest is really going to inspire you. My hope for you is that by the end of the show today, you just have these warm fuzzies, but that you also feel really empowered and clear and ready to move forward and to process whatever it is that has been either holding you back or bringing you down. Natalie Tysdal is an Emmy Award-winning news anchor, producer, and reporter with a 28-year legacy in broadcast journalism. Known for her journalistic integrity and engaging storytelling, Natalie has built a trusted reputation as a dynamic voice in media. As a mom of three, she blends her professional experience with personal experience, making her relatable and inspiring. And oh boy, does she inspire me. She is the host of the Natalie Tysdal podcast, where she explores topics at the heart of everyday life: health, family, and of course, faith. So, welcome to the show, Natalie.
So good to be with you, Laura.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. Okay, let's start with this frame. We're women. Women listen to this show. We have big hearts. We
Mm.
go through a lot, but I think what connects us all is our desire to do right by our family, love our friends, take care of people, and make the world a better place. And sometimes, despite our best effort, things wear us down. I'd love for you to share maybe some of the stressors in your life and how you remain positive, connected, and happy through it all.
You mean current or past?
Well,
We've all got them both.
you know, all of the above, whatever feels most relevant for you to dive into, let's dive into that.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to start is just for people to know that that's normal. Like it's not going to go away. We tend to have this image or picture of what we need to be perfect. And if that's the standard we set ourselves to, we will fail. And so to know that I have stressors every day, I have plenty of past stressors every day, but it's how we work through those things and the people we lean on, the things we do to successfully make it through those stresses in life. So let's go past, okay? Because that if we can, let's get into the career part in the past. And I know
Yes.
this is a big part of your last book, but I spent many years trying to reach this goal. And I finally did of this career aspiration that I had to be a television journalist. And I loved my career for many years, but it became a stress. It became what I often call toxic. And for those who watch the news, they know news can be toxic. And when you expose yourself to it day in and day out, for many hours a day. And I did a morning show in Denver. And it started as a 3.5 hour morning show. By the time I left, news is 24/7. By the time I left, I was doing 5 hours a day of live TV, 5 days a week. I added up the hours once and it was a ridiculous number.
That's a
But
lot.
talking about difficult things for that long really started to wear on me as a mom, as a woman. And that became a stress. And that thing that I had worked so hard for, I know your story is similar as a lawyer, but that thing that I worked so hard for became the problem in my life. But I didn't want to give it up. And people would always say, "You have such a glamorous job." And I would say, "Oh, thanks." And I think I held on to it for a long time because I felt like, well, everybody tells me this is such a great job, but I'm not feeling it.
Yes.
So during COVID, when a lot of us reanalyzed our lives, I was able to take a step back. I was broadcasting out of my basement at the time. I had a whole setup with a television and cameras and lights and a teleprompter. But I would just kind of mosey down in the morning with my pajama bottoms and my professional top and do the morning show. But I realized I don't have to do this. I can tell the stories I want to tell. I can interview the people I want to interview out of my basement or now out of my home office. And I don't have to live by someone else's rules. I don't have to do the stories they're telling me to do that I feel like are causing harm. So that big stress actually became a relief when I was aware that I could do this myself. So that's a little bit of my background, probably the biggest stress in
Ah,
my.
yeah, I love it. There are 2 points in that story that I kind of want to talk about. First is that turning point. It's
Mm,
great. It's what I wanted. I achieved it. Okay, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. How do you know when it goes from
mm,
stress to toxic? When it goes from I'm having a difficult moment to I gotta leave? Because
yeah.
that's hard to know.
Yeah. Early in my television career, I did an amazing workshop um, that helped me analyze. And I did an episode on this. I'll give you the episode number.
Oh, good.
But I did an episode on how to know. How, because so many people ask me, how did you know when to leave? Especially when it's a really cool thing that people are like, that's a dream job. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it, but it just wasn't that anymore for me. So the things that I go back to when it comes to that turning point are A, am I happy with what I'm doing? And when I say
Mhm.
happy, like really, are you happy? Do you feel joy in that thing? Do you look forward? Do you wake up and look forward to that thing, whatever it is, a relationship, a job, a volunteer thing, whatever it is? Do you feel joy with that? And to really get in touch with yourself to determine that. And then next, are you proud of it? Are you proud of what you're doing? And that was a big one for me. All three of the things I'm going to tell you became an issue, but I just wasn't happy. I didn't look forward to it. Part of it was the hours because I went in at 2:30 in the morning. I
Mm.
justified that by thinking, oh, I get to be home all afternoon with my kids. I get to be a mom and a professional woman. That sounds great until you're so exhausted that you're not good at either one. So
Yes.
that second thing, are you proud? I wasn't very proud. As a matter of fact, I wasn't at all proud of the material that we were putting out. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was fear inducing and toxic to a lot of people. I was proud of the health stories I was doing, which
Yeah.
is then how I parlayed that into a podcast. So, the thing you are proud of, how can you take that into something else? So, are you happy? Are you proud? And then the third one, are you challenged? Are you challenged in a healthy way? Because for me, my challenge wasn't the job, it was the sleep, and it was all of the wrong things. So if you can give yourself your own quiz and to ask yourself those three things, I think it'll help people in making those tough decisions.
I really like that. And I do want to pick apart some of those things. But
Yeah.
before I do, I want to go back to that second part that I said. The first one was, how do you know the turning point? The
Mm,
second one was, you said, I wanted to tell my own stories.
mm,
And I realized I could do that in my basement. I
mm,
could have my podcast. I could create my own
mm,
home studio. I could do it my way.
mm.
So my question around that is that had to be a mix of both excitement and thrill. And
And
it,
fear.
and fear. Yes. And how you managed that fear. Was it the same 3 steps or did you do something different to kind of get through that fear and make the leap?
Practically speaking, I think the answer for me was that I started before I stopped. So I started the podcast because we can all do that. As a matter of fact, I teach podcasting now because I found such a joy in having that ability to tell my own story,
Yeah.
to help people learn from what I went through. So, your question was, what was your question?
No, that's fine. Getting over the fear because it would be so
Yeah.
exciting but so
Yes.
scary. And what made you take that leap and be like, I'm going to
Yep.
take this risk and I'm going to do it. If it blows up in my face, I'm okay. If
Yep.
I'm wildly successful, I'm okay.
Yeah, I started before I stopped. I started the podcast before I left the business. So I got that little running start. I dipped my toes in it. I got to do it. I understood what the process was, and I felt good about it. It takes courage.
It
And
does.
and I totally understand people saying, but I can't leave that 9 to 5. I mean, I have bills to pay, right? I can't
Hmm.
just, if it's a job, I can't just leave. You really have to go all in. And it's okay to dabble a little bit until you have that confidence.
Until you know. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's just faith that we do
Yeah.
have to just take that leap.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the hardest parts for people
Yes.
is just having the courage and knowing I can do it. I can have that faith and working through it and then just really working hard. I've never had a problem with that. Well, maybe more recently here at this stage of life, my energy levels aren't as high as they were early in the business, but just really working hard and, being organized, having a
Yeah.
system, those
Yeah.
things all help.
Yeah, they do. They do. And what I love about your wisdom is it's timeless and it goes across every quote unquote problem, whether
Yeah.
it's career, like you were talking about, whether it's like what I went through. My husband cheated on me. What do I do? How do
Yeah.
I make those decisions? What is the turning point? How it doesn't matter if it's a health diagnosis, if it's something with your kids. The wisdom that you're sharing is wisdom that women can use in any situation to
Yeah.
move themselves forwards and to help them decide what
Yeah.
to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there are other things I think we can do. For me, my faith is a huge part of it. I mean, I prayed my way through this. I knew that I couldn't do this myself. I knew I needed help. And part of that was finding a good group of friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, God put the right people in my life at the right time that I had people to lean on and being open to that and really realizing that we're not meant to do this alone, that we need our community.
No.
And I
And
struggle with that because as a strong woman, I want to be able to do it myself. And I've been able to accomplish a lot of things myself. But being able to say, I'm not meant to do this alone. I need friends and mentors. We all do. So,
Mhm.
as a strong woman, that's a huge piece of advice that someone gave me is that yes, you're strong, but that doesn't mean you don't need other people.
I appreciate that so much. Same thing. I experienced that a lot. I know that a lot of the listeners here have experienced
hmm
that too. They're like, I don't want to tell my story. People are going to judge me. People are going to think I'm
hmm
weak or to blame or crazy for staying. So, yeah, friendship, that's a huge one. And you also mentioned mentoring, whether
Yeah.
it's formal or informal. I agree. Mentors are huge. Do you have anybody in your life that you either have or currently constantly look up to that can serve as a North Star for you?
Absolutely. And again, faith is a big part of this for me because the right people really showed up at the right time. And I could have easily said, you're my friend, let's have coffee, but now I'm going to do this on my own. But to really lean into those people that share the same values and the same work ethic, those things that you do, and actually say, I'm struggling with A, B, and C. I mean, I don't know about you, Laura, and
That's
everyone
hard.
listening. Do you admit the things you're struggling with? And maybe it's our generation. I think some of it has to do with our generation,
Yeah.
where we just don't want to admit our faults or
Yes.
our struggles.
Yes. And it goes back to what you said earlier. It's that perfection piece. I
hmm
am absolutely a perfectionist and I will do everything to create the perfect life, the perfect image. Not It's weird because it's like, why? Sometimes I'll ask myself why. Well, because you're supposed to be perfect, right?
Who told us that? Why do we think that?
Yeah.
Uh,
So
maybe
yeah,
it's a female thing. I don't
exactly. But
know.
you're right. Admitting I'm struggling, that's hard.
hmm
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really hard.
And
Really.
I just call it the power of vulnerability. When we can be vulnerable with someone and we can say, this is what I'm struggling with. Can you help me with this? It's amazing how that actually strengthens you.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I appreciate so much about your podcast. I was actually just listening to an episode you did recently on aging. And
Mm,
even though it's not like an episode where people come up on and say, I'm struggling with aging, it's something that we all think about. It's something
mhm,
that we all worry about. It's something that's on our mind. And you're not
mhm.
afraid to tackle those things that are on our minds, but in a positive, constructive way. It's not just that we're all going to complain about how horrible it is. It's,
Yeah.
and then what can we do?
Yeah, that's it, what you just mentioned is what's on our mind. That's what I try that's what I try to focus on and the topics that I really try to
Yes.
focus on. Scientifically based. I mean, where I found my strength as a journalist was in health news. And I loved being able to tell these stories, talking to doctors, talking to psychologists, talking to mental health, and you name it. I have interviewed thousands of health experts.
Yes.
And that's where I found people listened and got the most benefit out of the news business. That's where I would get emails and calls, and they would say, I didn't know this procedure existed. And I
Yeah.
would say, you can empower yourself by learning. You can empower yourself by asking all of those questions. So, my parlay from the traditional news business into podcasting became all about empowering people as a health journalist to scientifically get the best information and empower themselves.
Yeah. I love that. And that was my focus too when I created this podcast. When I went through the infidelity experience, the narrative in my head is, it's over, leave him, take him for all it's
Mm,
worth, get out of there, girl, you go, you.
mm,
And it was like my heart said, no, that doesn't feel right. And it
mm,
was really hard to find information out there. What's a different narrative? How do you heal? What does trauma do to a person? Both his trauma and my trauma. What about our family?
mm,
What about our finances? What about our 25-year history together? Like
mm.
that information wasn't out there. And until we have that information, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you did that. And that's where I kind of want to lean into next is that health piece.
Mm,
Going through a stressful or a traumatic situation impacts our health. You
mhm,
talked about like getting up so early and being tired, and that wears on a body. When I went through the infidelity, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I was
mm.
agitated all the time. Let's talk about health and specifically women's health and specifically women who don't want to admit
Yeah.
that they're struggling. What is your advice and insight on taking care of your health?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is what I talk about day in and day out.
Yes.
And I think first, if I can just go back for a moment, that the news business has changed so much that it's hard to know who to trust. And
Yes.
I have found, and it's a whole different podcast, but I have found that we don't turn on the TV often and say, I just trust that network. But
Mm.
what people have started to lean into is, I trust that person. I've gotten to know that person. I trust their insight. I trust their judgment. I trust their research. And that's why I felt like it, and we're seeing it all over the place now with different journalists, that we can follow them on their podcast, on their social media, and know I can trust it if they're putting that out. So that's why I started the podcast. And that's where, for women who are like you and me, and they are burned out. They don't know either which diet or which sleep advice. I mean, there's so much out there, Laura.
Oh,
It's like there are 5 million different things I can take to help me sleep better. But what really works
yeah.
and what really matters, be it mental health strategies, that's a lot. That's most of the time why people can't sleep. Is your brain really active at night?
Oh, yeah.
Mine is.
Yeah. All the time. It's active
Because
all
of
the time.
stress. I know. You go to bed and then all of a sudden all these things start. So getting that help either from the mental health side, the meditation, the supplements that help with that. So when you ask like about what types of health things, um, there's such an array. There's so many
Yes.
things, and a lot of that has to do for me. And many of the podcasts, not all, that I do are on a natural way to do that. There are a lot of medications, and they are needed, but where can we go first? And
Mhm.
where can we draw back if we're already taking? One of my favorite interviews early in my career was with a former pharmacist who left being a pharmacist because what she found was that you start taking one drug and it leads to another drug, and then you're taking another drug, and they all cause other problems. And
Mhm.
so if you're taking all of those, and as a pharmacist, she realized that and then wrote a book and did many things to help people get away from all of that. And she called it drug muggers. And it was, how can we take them away so we actually know what the problem is?
Yes.
And that really sparked energy in me to help people get to the root of the problem so that if you do have to take a formalized type of medication, that you're doing it for the right thing.
Yes, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. And I love what you said about you're trusting the person, because that also goes back into what you were talking earlier about some friendships and connecting with people. Because
Mm-hmm.
people listen to your podcast. Oh, Natalie's trustworthy. Wow, she talked about, the supplement. She talked about the importance of sleep. Then you meet with a friend who's struggling, and then you can say, you know what? It's great that you're taking that pharmaceutical, but here's another point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And then it builds that trust and we share, and it creates that network between
Yeah.
all of us so we can really grow and learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Hmm.
that's the power of friendships and networks and again vulnerability and being able to say, I'm feeling like this. What have you learned about this?
Hmm. Hmm. And you had mentioned something earlier about that it's normal to have struggles. It's normal. We have a lot going on. We're wives, we're moms, we're having careers, we're sisters, daughters. It's hard. It's really hard. And I think sometimes if we normalize that it's hard, we
Yeah.
feel less alone in that.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
that's life, right?
It is.
If for some reason we have this expectation of things being perfect. And if they're ever perfect, then it's probably not normal or you're fooling
Exactly.
yourself.
Exactly. Now, you had also said earlier that your podcast focuses on what's on your mind. What are the top things that are on women's minds?
Mm, balance, and it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Balance, balance emotionally, physically, in our relationships,
Hmm.
and I do topics on that because I think it impacts our health.
Yes.
Health is my main priority on the
Yes.
podcast. But absolutely, if our relationships and with like what you do, if your relationship is struggling, that's going to impact your health physically. It's
Yes.
it's going to impact your mental health. You're going to wake up worrying about that. Then your cortisol levels are going to be high. Then you're going to be tired. Then you're not going to sleep well. And it forms this whole pattern of being out of balance that causes other issues. And then all of a sudden, you're taking a medication to help you deal with it.
Yeah.
So finding that somewhat of a balance for
Yes.
you, and it's going to look different for every person.
What I love about the word balance is when you find your balance, like you're doing yoga and you're doing tree pose and you're standing there, you don't hit the pose and you stand there. You creep your way up, you wobble, you fall out,
Mm,
you touch your toe, and then you find it and you're like, voila, I've got it. And then sometimes you release it and sometimes you just fall out of it.
yeah.
But that's what I like about that word. It's not a destination. You just kind of
Mm,
journey towards it. And sometimes you hit it for a moment and then you fall out of balance. And that's
yeah.
all okay.
Yeah. You know what? Yoga is a really good analogy for this because I don't like yoga. But you know why? Because it requires me to be still. It requires me to slow down enough and commit. And it's hard. And I admit it. I'm being vulnerable with you. I
Mhm.
admit that my brain doesn't want to slow down long enough to do yoga.
I
So if
love
it's
that.
yoga for one person, walks are where I find that. But I have to be able to slow down enough to stop the long list of the to-do list in front of myself to go off and do. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, like me, it's a really good walk in nature. I get so much from fresh air
Mhm.
and the trees around me, the grass under my feet. Like I think there's a grounding that happens when we do that. But whatever it is for you, and just know what it is, and try different things
Mhm.
that you slow down long enough to let yourself be still, and that's where you're going to see change.
Yeah, that's really good advice because that is something that women say to me often when I start coaching with them. They do this laundry list. Well, I tried it and it didn't work. And it's like, okay, first of all, maybe try it twice, see if it works.
Yeah,
And then if it doesn't, how can you critically break that down? Like you
yeah.
so eloquently said, I don't want, my mind doesn't want to do it. My mind doesn't want to
Mhm.
slow down. That's feedback. Okay, so what might work better? Oh, a walk in nature. I'm engaged. I'm looking. I'm feeling the fresh air. My senses are engaged. So my mind has things to grasp onto, and
Hmm.
it works for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something about that being still that
Oh,
it's funny. I have two daughters and a son, and my daughters are just like me. And I sometimes I think that's really great, and sometimes I say, "I'm sorry, please learn from me." Because my oldest daughter, she has taken a job twice a week that's 2 hours away from where she lives. So
yeah.
she commutes and she calls me on this commute. And it's such a blessing because I get this time with her. But at the same time, I say to her, like, it's okay to just be in your own head for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But she wants me to help her fill that time. And I love that because I love the time with her. But you know what it's like when, wait, I'm by myself. There's no one to entertain me. I'm driving. Should I turn on music? I'm like, sometimes that's a really good place, even if it's your walk, whatever that is, to stop all of that commotion, to stop that chatter, to stop that conversation, and just be still. Do you struggle with that? Most women do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's that pressure. And I think some of it goes back to that perfectionism too. I should be doing something. I should
Yes.
be doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. We
Yeah.
should ourselves a lot, don't we?
Yes, we do. I want to talk a little bit about being this whole woman, being healthy. I love how you said balance isn't real, but striving for it, focusing on the emotional wellness, the
Mhm.
physical wellness, the relational wellness.
Mhm.
In your words, what does it mean to be a balanced, whole, healthy woman?
Oh, there are so many parts of that. I think you hit all of them very nicely. Um, I think we have to consider our physical health first.
I do too.
When you've got that balanced, then and you could argue it goes a lot of different ways, but to get enough sleep. That was something I didn't do well for many years, but I felt like, well, I'm doing everyone else favors here, my kids, my job. I'll just work my way through this. And I would get by on 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. It
Hmm.
took years off of my life. Don't let that happen. Sleep is and has to be a priority.
Yeah.
And if that's 8 hours for you, know what that sweet spot is for you and then get it, prioritize it. Don't feel like you're being selfish in getting that. So, that to me physically is number one. Then it's, are you eating the right things? The world will tell us that go ahead, you can eat this and that'll be fine. And we do crave the sugar, the salts, the all of those things, but to be very intentional about what you're putting in your body because that's going to affect how you sleep. It's going to affect how you act. It's going to affect, as you just listened to the episode on skin, and same with exercise, that we want to think, oh, I can just do this once a week or go on the walk here and there. But those are things that matter more than we realize. And it's self-care to do that. You're really, you're giving yourself years by doing those things.
Yes. And I want to tag on because when you talked about self-care, so many women will say things like, well, I'm doing it for maintenance. And the energy that they put into
Mm,
it is kind of aggressive. I'm
yeah.
sleeping. I got to sleep. I'm exercising. Watch me exercise.
Mm,
And that those are the moments, those are the most ideal moments where we can drop in. Like you talked about
yeah.
sitting in the car and just being with yourself.
Mm,
How can we enjoy sleep, enjoy moments laying in bed, even if we can't sleep? How can we comfort ourselves? How can we bring some elegance and some beauty to maybe preparing our food or looking and appreciating the sweetness of fresh food? How can we connect to
mm.
how we feel in our exercise and not just like, yeah, I'm in a class, but I'm totally not feeling my body?
You know where the switch came for me and how I advise women now is for a long time it was the list of what I had to do. I
Hmm.
had to do it because someone told me that was the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And where the switch came for me was that I get to do this. It's not I have to work out 3 or 4 times a week, or I'm not going to live a long life, or I'm not going to lose the weight, but to actually think for myself, I get to eat healthy food. Wow. I get to eat these beautiful fruits and vegetables where the colors are,
They're
it's
amazing.
funny, the colors are real. They're not food dyes. I get to eat this.
Yeah,
And there are many people in the world who don't have that privilege.
right.
And same with exercise, that I actually get to do this. Wow. That's amazing that I
Yes.
have the opportunity to do this. So
I
to
love it.
reframe your mind in everything, and that this can apply towards exercise, it can apply towards food. It can even be, I get to prepare my own meal. I don't have to order food or go out. I
I
actually
get.
get to enjoy this time. So reframing that in that way, but anything in life, like it's such a funny thing because it can even be, I get to go to work today. What a
Yeah.
privilege.
Yeah. I love that phrase. I wrote that down and I'm definitely putting that in the notes too. I get to, because
Mhm.
also for infidelity, I got to repair my marriage.
Yeah.
I got to learn how to value myself.
Yeah.
I get the relationship of my dreams right now, every day. And
Yeah.
when we have bad days and when we have fights, because we're a real couple and we really
Yep.
do,
Yeah.
I get to learn more communication skills. I get to work with another human being. I get to go deeper. And whoa, I mean, that's humbling. That's
Yeah.
beautiful and that's humbling. And that's what life is really all about.
And I challenge people, when you find yourself saying to yourself, either in your mind or out loud, I have to do something, try to replace that word with
Yeah.
get. It'll be a little shocking at first, especially for your children. For your children to hear you say, I get to go to work versus I have to go to work today. What a great model you are to them of being positive and realizing that that's a privilege that we have those things. Now, sometimes we want those jobs to change and everything, but then it's, I get to make a choice for myself. I
Yes.
get to change my job if I want to. So
Yeah.
when you find yourself using the word have, I have to do something, replace it and see how that feels. It'll feel
Yeah.
funny at first, but it works.
Natalie, that's my favorite thing ever. I'm just going to say that's my
It's
favorite thing
life
ever.
changing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that also goes back to the turning point where we talked originally. How did you figure it out? What was the turning point? Dream career, kind of feeling stressful. Oh my gosh, it's toxic. Everything has changed. And you gave us those three filter questions. One, am I happy? Am I excited? Am I feeling joy? Two, am I proud of what I'm doing? And then three, is this challenging me? How am I growing through this?
Hmm.
Just moving that into this frame, you got to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah.
You get to ascertain, you get to go deep, you get to crowdsource it with friends if you want, you get to pray about it, and then
Yeah.
you get to make a decision.
Yep, absolutely. And for
Mhm.
me, that was, I just, I think COVID, as horrible as it was, allowed so many of us to be still long enough to
Mhm.
reanalyze our lives, see what was important, and make some pretty big changes. And that
Yes.
was the turning point for me.
Yeah. In crisis, there's always huge opportunity.
Yeah, always. But we
Always.
don't want to admit that, but always.
Yeah. And that's why my listeners are here too. They are in a horrible crisis.
Mhm.
Infidelity is the worst thing that has ever happened to
Yeah,
me. It's
yeah.
awful. It guts you on so many different levels.
But it
And yet
forced you,
now,
didn't it? It forces you to reanalyze what's
and
important to you, what
yes,
matters most, and
yes,
where do you find that strength, and what do you really want out of life? Yeah.
yes. And to see things we didn't want to see.
Yeah. I like to say, and I'm sure people have heard this, but I have lived through it. We don't grow on the mountaintop. We just don't. But
No.
we will grow in the valley. But
Mhm.
we need people to walk that valley with us. We
Yes, we do.
shouldn't try to do that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I really appreciate what you said about trustworthy people. Find the people that you trust. Find
Hmm.
the person that you know gives good advice and that is not going to steer you wrong, but will
Yeah.
have your heart and hold your heart and lead you forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the, you are the sum of your five closest friends. Who
Yes.
are those people? And what values do they have? Are they sharing the values that you hold important? And are they breathing that into you in your hard times?
Yes. And tying that to the news cycle too, you're right. There's a lot of
Hmm.
fear, there's a lot of agitation. How do I feel after watching this news? Is my nervous system activated or do I
Hmm.
feel empowered? Same with friends. Am I
Yeah.
activated or am I empowered? Am I held or am I dismissed?
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of women, especially, have been trained to ask themselves how they feel and if this is helpful or if this is harmful,
Yeah.
because we'll rock the boat if we do. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want us to rock the boat.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned the news cycle and what are you filling your brain with? I
Yes.
think that's really important for us to address as well, because if your habit is to wake up in the morning and turn on the news, well, think of how you're starting your day. Is that how you want to start your day? I
No.
mean, maybe you're listening to a really positive news show, but I don't know too many of them out there.
Mhm.
Unless you found some podcasts like mine and yours and
Yes.
others. What are you starting your day with? What are you ending your day with?
Yes.
My favorite routine, and I used to think I have to get up, and I went straight to work in the morning for so many years. It was literally roll out of bed, grab a cup of
Go.
coffee, get ready for the show in the dressing room at work, and on the air by 4 a.m. I didn't have the opportunity to have a morning routine
Uh,
that was healthy. And now my favorite thing is waking up before everybody else, right before the sun comes up. I love the dusk. It's such a beautiful time of day.
yes.
And I grab my cup of coffee because I've made it the night before and I can smell it when I wake up.
Hmm.
And then in those first 20 minutes or so, just sitting on my little couch, it's right behind me, in fact, my dog by my side, my coffee. I have my red light therapy, which I just find so helpful and good for my body, and filling my mind with things that are positive. It's a devotion for me in the morning. I open my Bible. I've read something that's encouraging. I journal for a few minutes. We're talking 20 minutes. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that I'll mention after that is then I can open my phone, and my phone is curated to feed positive things to me. And as
Good.
much as we don't like social media for our mental health, it can be positive if we've curated it that way. And I can
Yeah.
explain that because
Yes.
what my social media will look very different from my teenagers' social media, but we can train even our teenagers if they're going to be on social media to curate that social media in a positive way. The
Yes.
algorithm will start picking up on the things that we tell it to. So if I'm
Yeah.
searching for positive things, if I'm searching for scripture, mental health, health tips, we're going to get more of that. So when I open my feed, I am so encouraged. And if there's something that's not encouraging to me or distracting to me, I unfollow it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can control that narrative.
Yes. And I love that tip because, well, like we said at the beginning, life is hard. I was betrayed by my intimate partner, but I felt betrayed at work, hence my second book. You talked about you felt like your career betrayed you. When things go wrong, COVID, I think so
Mm-hmm.
many of us felt like the world is betraying us.
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
can this be that we can be shut down? Betrayal is everywhere.
Yeah.
But what you can control is those 20 minutes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
leaning into the positivity and the health. And I want to talk a little bit more also about health because sometimes people get the wrong impression that exercise is about being size two
Mm.
or that health and wellness is about being beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I want to look good because it makes me feel good. I want to be a
Yeah.
healthier weight because it makes me feel good, but it's not about the aesthetic. It's about
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So, I mean, how many times have you met someone who just makes you feel so good? their aura, their physical beauty is so minute compared to how they make you feel.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important part of our inner health. And that is, I feel good. Because I've taken care of myself mentally, spiritually, and physically.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell a story in my first book about a fitness class that I was going into, and I looked at the instructor and I was judgy. I was all judgy. I'm like, she is not cute. She is not fit. She is, ew, how is she teaching this class? This is just icky. And by the end of the class, she was so positive and her
Mm.
aura was just wonderful. And she was saying all these incredible things. And by the end of the class, I was in love with her. I'm like, she is the most beautiful,
Mm.
sexy, gorgeous, like all the things. I
What
thought
a
she was
great
everything.
example. Yeah.
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 And just like that, whether you're recovering from career betrayal or relationship betrayal, or I've even felt betrayed by my kids. I didn't raise you to do
Mm.
that. What do you mean you're doing that? That's not who we are.
It's so true.
Yeah. How can we continue to connect, whether it's that morning ritual, but to emote, to be how we want others to feel,
Yeah.
be how we want others to see us?
Yeah. I mean that is really knowing what's important to you. And I'll go back to what I mentioned just a few minutes ago. It's about being still long enough to know those things. If
Hmm.
we just fill our minds all the time and react to
Hmm.
what's happening around us or our jobs or the problem, I mean, for a long time, I feel like it's, I ran towards the problem because news was always a problem. It's like there's a problem in this part of the world and a problem here and a problem there. And so I, as humans, we are attracted to problems. We
Yes.
have to like turn the magnet around and go, I don't need the problem. I need to be still long enough to help myself.
Hmm. Hmm. So, a couple questions around that because stillness is difficult.
Hmm.
How do you start being still when there are problems, when you are overwhelmed, when
Hmm.
the world is stressing you out and you're like, I know I need to be still, I know I need to be still, kind of like
Yeah.
you in yoga. How do you actually drop in and find that stillness in the midst of stress?
Well, so first of all, I don't think it's easy to do that if you don't have a practice of it. If you're caught up in the busyness, you're not all of a sudden just going to stop in the middle of your busyness and say, I need to be still right now. I don't think that comes naturally. So habits are really big.
Hmm.
Um, for me, it's that morning routine. If I miss that morning routine and I wake up late, I feel it all day. So
Yeah.
creating that stillness habit. It might be first thing in the morning. I think that's the easiest way. Some people like to get up though and go exercise first thing in the morning, and that is their self-care. That's
Yeah.
great. But where are you creating that stillness? Is it in the car that you don't take a call all of the time in the car, or you don't always play music in the car or a podcast? That is that your stillness?
Hmm.
Is it coming home and having 10 minutes to just decompress and read at a certain time every day? That's why I find mornings so good for me.
Yeah.
It might be before bed. That's a really great time to create that stillness because we know scientifically that taking our brains away from the blue light and phones or computers or TVs right before bed, that's good for our brains. Can that be a moment of stillness or devotion? Or I have a couple of podcasts that are soothing that I love to listen to at night when I'm brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed, getting away from the screens. Those things I think are really important. Intentionality and
Hmm.
habits are probably the biggest tips I can give you on finding that stillness. And
I
we know
love,
it's not an overnight thing, too. I've just
no.
gone through this with my 15-year-old son because, he's a teenage boy. Habits aren't so easy for him. So,
Yeah.
how can we create a habit? And I have up on my board, my second daughter and I did. She's really good at this stuff. We did goals, priorities, and habits. And it was just kind of a fun little vision board project we did over Christmas. And I did it with him. He was so reluctant. He was like, "Why am I doing this, Mom?" I'm like, "Because if we don't have that, then what are we working towards? We're just kind of shooting in the dark every day. Like, at least have
Yeah.
something." So we're working towards that with him. And I think for all of us, think of yourself like a 15-year-old teenage boy and go, if I if I don't create these goals, priorities, habits, nobody's going to do it for me.
hmm I love that goals, priorities, and habits and the intentionality around that.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, we love focusing on problems. And the more we focus on problems, the more problems we see.
Yeah.
And what would it be like if we focused on solutions? What would it be like if we had a goal to find the answer or, a
Yeah.
habit that led us towards that? And if we prioritized everything that you talked about in those three questions, joy, feeling happy, pride
Yeah.
in what you're doing, and then challenging yourself to grow.
Yeah.
If you take nothing else from this show, what I would like you to say is, I'm prioritizing my joy. I want to make joy a habit.
Yeah.
Happiness is my goal. Feeling proud of myself is a habit, my goal, my priority, and challenging myself to grow. How can
Yeah.
I create habits for that? How can I prioritize all of that?
Yeah. And we know scientifically speaking that it doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen in 2, 3, 4, 5 days,
No.
not even 2 weeks, but 3 weeks is the magic number.
Yes.
So if you can just do, we can do anything for 3 weeks. Think of how fast that goes. I mean, I feel like it was just Christmas,
It,
and all
it,
of a
it
sudden we're
was,
like
wasn't
spring,
it?
right?
Yeah.
Like you can do anything for 3 weeks. Tell yourself, I am going to do this one thing. Maybe it's journal. Maybe it's devotion, whatever that thing is, and start with one. You're not going to be able to accomplish all of them at the same time. Start with just one and then see the power in that and then build in another one.
Yeah. Thank you for permission to break that down small because
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Hmm.
women, myself included, today I'm going to build a new website. I'm going to start a new podcast. I'm going to clean out all my
Oh,
closets and I'm going to walk the dog. And then
I'm
it's like, I'm
so
a
guilty of that.
failure.
And then you fail, and then you feel like a failure because you couldn't do all of those things because you set too many at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Almost every day of my life.
Another tool that I have found very helpful. Have you heard the term habit stacking?
Yes.
I think it's
Yes.
so helpful. What's something that you do every day? What is
Yeah.
something that you,
Brush your
yeah,
teeth,
you're not
go
going to
to the
miss?
bathroom, eat
Yes.
breakfast, walk
Hmm.
the dog. Yeah.
And you make your coffee.
Yes.
If when you make your coffee, you stretch for 5 minutes while the coffee's brewing or you're making it, you get 5 minutes of self-care in while that's happening. And,
Yeah.
health speaking, it's take your vitamins when you brush your teeth because you're probably, hopefully, brushing your teeth every day. Some
Yes.
of those things that are hard to do, stack it with something you're already doing, and you'll be more successful in doing it.
Yeah, I love that. One of my affair recovery programs includes daily 3-minute meditations.
Mm,
And 3 minutes, we all have time for that. But so many people resist that. And I
yeah.
will often tell them, listen to it while you're brushing your teeth. No,
Yeah.
you're not really meditating, you're brushing your teeth, but it
Hmm.
starts getting into your brain. And then pretty soon you're like, no, I feel different. I want to do it before I brush my teeth, or I want to do it
Yeah.
after I brush my teeth. So you're right. Stack the habit, let those feelings develop. We don't fall in love overnight, things
Hmm.
develop.
Yeah.
And you will start noticing after you've done it, this shifts the way I feel. This shifts the way I show up. I am
Yes.
happier. I am more present. I'm a better mom. I'm a better human.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such good advice.
Yeah. So, in closing, what I want to ask you, Natalie, is what is your dream for women, for the world?
Mm.
You have a beautiful podcast. What is your goal? What do you hope to accomplish through the wisdom that you are sharing?
Oh, what a great question. It's wholeness. That's the word that just came to me right away.
Mhm.
Is wholeness. And a lot of that is physical. We can control the physical, but once we do that, then we can work on the emotional. The spiritual, I think, is the foundation. So, although physical, we can control, the spiritual part of that is a huge part of your wholeness. Where are you connecting? And where are you finding that strength within so that you can get out there, be healthier physically and emotionally and in your relationships?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I appreciate how you talked about the physical too, because it's easy to see. And faith
Hmm.
is important, spirituality is important, whatever your beliefs are, we all connect differently,
Yeah.
but it's not tangible.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to see. So I love how
Hmm.
you're like, yeah, start with the physical, the faith is the foundation, but sometimes we can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are so many things. Just don't stop. Don't stop trying. It's so easy to give up when we feel overwhelmed. And I've been there. We've all been there. Don't give up. Keep
Mhm.
moving forward. There's
Love it.
always something you can do. And there are awesome resources, podcasts like yours, like mine, that will give you inspiration on your walk or in your still time while you're cooking. That's what I love so much about what we do is that we can fill ourselves with that inspiration while we're vacuuming or, picking up the house or whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find more about you, your podcast, your blog, your work?
Thank you for asking. I have a website, Natalie Tysdal, TYSDAL.com. A lot of free resources on there. Many of the things that we have talked about, some awesome grocery lists for getting healthy on scientifically proven diets that work, emotional health, how to make a vision board. I have a free download on that when we talked about like my goals and habits and priorities, all of those things. Find me on natalietysdal.com. My podcast is the Natalie Tysdal Podcast, and I would just love to communicate with you and have you as part of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also find my guest appearance on Natalie's podcast. I will link that below. And what I highly recommend, listeners, as we've talked about all this perfectionist, when I did Natalie's podcast, I was having a bad hair day. So if you
You
want to see me
were?
with a bad, I was having a funky hair
I
day.
did not realize that.
It's just one of those perfectionist things. So this is just me being vulnerable. I was like, dang, the content was great, but what is up with my
But you
hair?
know what, Laura? Your content was so good and your heart came through in such a way that I didn't even see that, just like the fitness instructor you talked about. I did not even
Exactly.
see that.
Exactly. So that's why I oftentimes like to point out when things go really awry because they go really awry for all of us and it is okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your heart, for your wisdom, for your vulnerability and sharing that, you know what? It's not this whole perfect, sparkly life. We go through tough times and it's okay. Don't stop. Focus on those goals. Check Natalie out. You will really, really love her heart and her content. And listeners, as usual, have an amazing week. And always remember to flaunt exactly who you are because who you are is always more than enough.